Welcome to today's Software AG webcast titled, Go Agile in a Big Way with Strategic Portfolio Management. Today's webcast will be presented by Dr. Ulrich Kalex, Senior Vice President, Alphabet Product Management, and Independent Research Analyst, Margo Visitacion, Vice President and Principal Analyst at Forrester Research. As we move through today's presentation, we invite you to submit any questions that you may have via the Q&A box, which is located on the bottom center of your webcast dashboard. We will address your questions at the end of today's program. In the event that we're not able to answer your question, your submission will be noted, and today's presenters will be back in touch with you as soon as possible. Today's presentation is being recorded. This program recording will be made available to you in an email that will be sent to you within approximately 24 hours. Additionally, this webcast recording will be posted to the Alphabet playlist on the Software AG YouTube channel later today. It is now my pleasure to welcome Ulrich Kalex.
Thank you, Will. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thanks in particular to Margo joining us on this program today. We all, of course, know about the proliferation of digital solutions across the industry. Every of our companies, administrations is affected by this. And Agile is seen as a way to accelerate capabilities to successfully deliver on the digital challenges that are being posed to all of us. Hence, we believe this is a very timely topic, and we are glad to have you all here. We will be sharing the presentation between Margo and myself. Margo is going to go first, so I'd like to hand over to Margo at this point in time. Thank you, Margo, again for joining us here, and over to you.
Thank you, Ulrich. Thank you very much. And hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today for this presentation. And would like to talk to you about how strategic portfolio management can help actually accelerate an organization's ability to scale Agile and move from just doing Agile or doing Agile work streams or Agile products to actually being Agile and helping to change the thought process and understanding how transparency and visibility at the portfolio level can help you make better decisions in your Agile delivery practices. So with that, let's get started. You know, when we talk about digital transformation, it seems to be one of the, from a technology perspective, one of the bigger buzzwords that we hear. And you know, at Forrester, we often wonder: are we in midstream now, or are we coming to the peak of Agile? Of digital transformation. Our surveys in many of our surveys, we ask that question of where organizations are in their digital transformation journey. And from our business and technology services survey, 66% of firms that we've surveyed currently are involved in, or what I think is really interesting, are always in a state of digital transformation. Why? Because digital really changes the way you do business, and the concepts, as we learn more about digital, pushes organizations even further into the state of digital transformation. So we're seeing 2/3 of the organizations in digital, but only 34% of CEOs have reported successful transformation, and this comes from a McKinsey study. And anecdotally, as I speak with executives, I hear this frequently, and it is a challenge for organizations. And one of the bigger challenges is understanding how organizations are bringing together the concept of technology and business, how they need to work together. And we interviewed a former CEO of a national restaurant chain, and he stated that one of his biggest challenges was struggling to understand the importance of technology strategy to the brand. That technology is not just something that a business delivers, but it's really an integrated part today of the way that a company does business. And when you read a significant amount of research or articles about digital transformation and Agile, you hear all the time about business and getting business to understand how important technology is, but it's a two-way street. In interviewing a CEO of a professional services firm, we asked about bringing business and technology together, and that CEO responded that getting their software leaders to understand how to set priorities and the flow of business to get them to work together more effectively was pretty darn hard. So as a company or as an organization that services, the public, as they're trying to deliver and meet customer expectations, an increasingly sophisticated customer base that, understands the way that they want to be serviced and have similar experiences in a digital or in a face-to-face situation, organizations have to make that leap. It's no longer technology versus business or technology and business working together and not yet quite understanding how they need to work together. Really has to become seamless. And that's because expanding software, what we found in our research is that when you are thinking about technology as being part of the brand, and making it be a seamless business technology strategy to deliver to your customers, to win, serve, and retain customers, you've got to look at expanding software innovation to the enterprise scale. And what we see in our research is that we've got to bring modern application delivery, something that's been around for quite a long period of time, and is pretty well understood, part of the mainstream. And what you see at the bottom of this slide here, modern application delivery, you need to bring that together with leadership. So what we do at Forrester is we focus on what we see here in this center part of the slide, what we call the levers that an organization has to push to be able to bring these two elements together to be an integrated way of thinking and having an agile organization and having it be organic to the way that you do business. So you need to focus on things like culture. Is your organization really ready to be agile and foster an innovation culture and an experimentation and learning culture, so that teams can be empowered to work together? How do you foster the right kind of talent and build the right types of structures to support technology teams and business teams to work together more effectively? What are the right metrics that you need to have in place in order to measure productivity? Because you have to trust your teams, but you've got to validate what they do. And of course, processes. How do we take processes from the traditional methodologies into agile methodologies and practices, and then leveraging the right technologies to bring it all together? So at Forrester, we look at how we bring both sets of organizations together. How do you empower employees and teams to innovate and deliver agile software on an agile basis, which is as fast as your customers can consume and with the quality that your customers expect? And then how do you speak to leadership to be able to talk about things like funding and planning and bringing that and making that a continuous practice? And we try to bring it all together at Forrester in our research, and strategic portfolio management is really a significant element to help that happen. Because regardless of what you think of your organization, how functional or dysfunctional you are, every organization has a process. You have a strategic planning process where you assess current situations and make decisions around what your organization wants to be, and you make a decision around what that target state is. What are we going to, where do we want to go, and how do we want to get there? And you devise a roadmap to help you get to that point. There's also an execution set of processes. You execute the plan. Hopefully you measure your progress and your productivity, and you use that feedback to help you optimize. The challenge is, for most organizations, these two sets of processes are really disconnected, and they're also forced into constructs that don't support an agile way of planning and delivering value to customers. And because they're forced into a project-oriented construct that we'll talk about in just a minute, that challenges new planning and delivery practices. It hinders your ability to innovate. You know, when we asked in our priorities and journeys survey, and our software surveys, we asked organizations and leaders, you know, how well are you able to innovate to deliver new technologies? And 50% of the respondents said it's moderately challenging, and 39% said it's very, very challenging. When you think about it, 89% of your decision makers are saying it's really hard for us to innovate. How can you possibly move to an agile process? You know, and recognize that in order to do that, you're ultimately changing your business model. And we see here that a significant number of respondents are saying it's moderately to extremely challenging to be able to do that. When we turned to software leaders and we said, you know, how well are you suited, is your organization suited for agile delivery? 18% responded that their managers don't understand it at all. 57% are in the middle. There's a few that do understand it, and there's a few that don't. And only 25% of the managers have internalized the spirit of agile delivery and lead in its adoption to transform the organization. So why are we stuck in this mode that prevents us from innovating? Well, one of the areas is that we aren't yet looking at the changes in terms of culture, experimentation, and networks within an organization that support and foster Agile as a culture. In order to take Agile to scale, you've got to build a culture of empowerment. You've got to combine top-down and bottom-up activities to show that you're providing guidance for where an organization wants to go, but also empowering your teams to innovate, experiment, and deliver value incrementally to say, yes, we are learning from what we are doing. You have to do this with some form of guidance, so you want to use frameworks out there, SAFe, Spotify, large-scale Scrum, using them as a start to help you organize your teams and provide guidance in how to proceed, but recognize that it's practices that make you proficient in Agile and not necessarily rigid adherence to process. And again, you want to trust your teams, but you need to validate. You have to consistently deliver and demonstrate value. We said from a cultural change, you've got to adopt an experimentation culture. You need to use frequent feedback, again, consistently demonstrate value. So you use frequent feedback to build trust in order to drive adoption. You need to look at quality as a key element. So using things like testing and feature flagging to support feedback. But what really makes it work is creating networks that break down command and control modules. In traditional organizations, you see top-down pushing of strategy and vision, whereas in Agile organizations, you are building communities of teams that are learning to work together more effectively. And we're seeing companies now leverage models such as Spotify, leveraging the concept of chapter and guild to be able to build community, but you're also actively involving leadership and teams in a collaborative effort, and this is where strategic portfolio management comes in, to have joint refinement of backlogs to manage dependencies across portfolios. So you're working together collaboratively to foster that agile mindset. And I talked previously about how being forced into a project-driven construct really challenges an organization's ability to be able to make that transformation to Agile. And it starts with the way companies plan. Traditional planning doesn't support new business needs and an innovative culture. Why? Because you're locked into understanding how you can consume budgets versus how you deliver value. Traditional planning starts with that big sweaty meeting behind closed doors, where an organization looks at their mission statement that doesn't change from very much from year to year or decade to decade, but is really providing the overall high-level direction for the company. And from that, you derive, leadership derives annual initiatives. And if you're lucky, you're getting that top-down guidance presented to you, very often in the form of a PowerPoint slide or maybe a Visio diagram. And that's disseminated to departments that go off and then develop a wish list of projects based upon the budget that they have to consume, and they're doing it in the silos of their departments. What happens is when you do come back together and submit your budget for the year with that wish list of projects, and you submit it to your technology teams for estimates, you get estimates that are not based in reality of what you actually can do, but what you think you can do, and you go into the budget wars that results in a negotiated set of priorities that get approved based upon detailed estimates for work that we're not yet doing and not quite totally sure of what the outcomes need to be because they're based upon budgets. And what happens is those projects get executed on silos. They're prioritized politically. Costs are tracked and reported, but outcomes and benefits aren't consistently tracked or reported. That doesn't support an agile way of working where you need that constant feedback. So what we're seeing is organizations that want to break that mold and go agile in a big way and become an agile organization, they're starting to adopt an agile framework where they're looking at things from a product perspective. And great example is a North American insurance company that we've interviewed. They now have 40% of their technology spend is dedicated to product budgets that are allocated to product teams. They're now funding product teams and product budgets. The 60% are still 60% of the spend is still allocated to an IT budget because you still have ongoing IT requirements that need to be supported. They're thinking more like a software company now. So you have product budget and IT budget. They get split out into buckets like innovation, where they were spending 5 to 10% when we first interviewed them, and that's now starting to creep up, allocated to innovation, looking at new ideas and experiments. They still need to identify goals, but they're placing bets against those goals. And those bets that are realized then get approved to become products. And the team is then now transferred to a product team and is tasked now with delivering minimum viable product or MVP. And again, still having to deliver to goals, identified goals, and now they're being measured on value. The difference between traditional budget allocation and an agile product allocation is that MVP allocation grows as agile adoption increases. As they transfer more to a product-based budget, we're seeing that MVP allocation become bigger as the agile adoption increased. They're still being measured on delivered value in order to maintain that funding. And they're recognizing that there's still an ops and maintenance allocation for legacy applications that are still being maintained, cloud infrastructure, their modernization of their technology stacks, that's there, but the percentage of that budget now shifts downward as Agile adoption is increased. I think the thing that is very different from traditional planning is that the organization is measured on delivered value, and funding is adjusted based upon that delivered value. So their planning model looks very different, and we're seeing this in more. It's not a huge percentage. We're talking about 10 to 12% of the companies that we've interviewed are now moving in this direction, but they're seeing benefits, and this we expect to see gain further traction as more companies go through and mature their digital transformation. And Agile planning takes a portfolio approach, and strategic portfolio management plays a very important role here. Organization sets strategic direction. Again, as I said, mission statements don't change, but planning becomes far more collaborative. They're setting strategic direction and identifying outcomes. Much more focused instead of consuming budget, they're now looking at identifying and achieving outcomes. Together, business and technology is collaborating to develop a strategic roadmap, establishing 12 to 18-month rolling budgets that are based upon identification of business strategies and the identification of strategic architecture. This together provides top-down guidance to product teams who are responsible for working with their stakeholders and their customers to prioritize the portfolio, and this determines funding allocations. So they can then determine the product and solution architecture that's going to be funded via value streams that are not just individual projects, but looking at related streams of work that can help an organization improve and enhance their capabilities. It's then being delivered by autonomous product teams, and they're providing feedback. As I showed in the previous slide, you set goals, you're measured on the value that you're delivering, so they're measuring outcomes, and that determines funding adjustments. They're doing it on a consistent cadence, very often sprint to monthly level, that then is assessed at a higher level, generally on a quarterly basis, to determine what the value is back to the organization, to their strategic plan, and that enables them to adjust roadmaps on an incremental basis. So you establish a continuous portfolio process where the elements of portfolio management don't change. You still have demand management, you still have prioritization and capacity management, and you still have performance management and execution where you're delivering on that, but because it becomes continuous, where we're seeing companies manage their portfolio and report on their portfolio on a monthly basis and assess their roadmaps on a quarterly basis, the activities within the elements of portfolio management are broken down into smaller and more consumable chunks. So you are looking at identifying what your digital change for your roadmap is going to be and identifying the capabilities that are part of the value streams that you want to enhance, but you're doing it in smaller chunks. So you're looking at your demand that comes into the funnel and making assessments and trade-off analysis on a continuous basis that allows you to groom backlogs, identify the key features and services, and then monitor performance based upon the outcomes that you'd like to achieve. The key difference in an Agile organization are the activities of trade-off analysis and retrospective. We're looking at what we've done to deliver value instead of consuming budgets and just marching forward. And based upon what we've delivered, that allows us to adjust the portfolio on a consistent basis. This set of activities, breaking the portfolio down into a continuous process, portfolio management, into a continuous process and managing it in smaller chunks still allows you to have intra-year planning for roadmaps, portfolios, and budgets. You still have annual operating budgets. That's accounting. It doesn't change. But what companies can now do is break it down and understand that most companies find that their customers can consume significant change on a quarterly basis. Yes, you can have features being delivered on a daily or daily basis for others. They can consume small change on a daily basis, but significant change on a quarterly basis. So instead of planning for multi-year programs that can't be controlled, where you don't really know how well you're going to deliver 12 to 18 months from now, they're broken down into quarters so that you can see how your teams are delivering value and maintaining the velocity. But you're reviewing it on a much more frequent basis in order to maintain that velocity and manage dependencies more effectively. So you're leveraging tools in a portfolio ecosystem to help you do that. Your strategic themes, your strategic portfolio management are managed in SPM tools. Your budget and your people are being managed also in SPM tools to help you see that planning level and get an insight into the top tiers of execution. Sprint and Kanban, once you get into execution, are managed in value stream mapping tools. By connecting your strategic roadmap to your continuous execution, you can establish feedback loops to keep everybody on the same page and build transparency into the process. And because you're building out this ecosystem, cross-functional participation creates integrated guidance and consistent feedback, because now you don't have silos of tools, but you have the roles working together more effectively. Executives looking at strategic planning tools and portfolio management tools to perform their strategic planning processes, but now they are connected to enterprise architects through the combination of strategic portfolio management and enterprise architecture technology. That then drives guidance to project and portfolio management leaders or product portfolio management leaders, who then can advise on capacity and the ability to be able to execute on the roadmap. And as execution leads, such as product owners, scrum masters, or program managers, or product managers, as they then go through their execution plans, they can provide feedback to leaders in order to help decision-making around adjusting the roadmap. In order to do this, you need specific skills for end-to-end process ownership. We're now seeing portfolio management offices have become more of a combination virtual and physical office, where you have chief strategists. They may be called chief strategic officers, or they may have another name, but this person owns the planning and execution process. And they're bringing together executives, EA leaders, PMO leaders, and product leaders to make decisions at the right time based upon where you are in the integrated strategic and execution process. You're also bringing together the right stakeholders, regardless of where you are in assessing, deciding, or building roadmaps, or actually on the execution process, to provide feedback so that you're establishing that continuous feedback loop. So the combination of guidance and planning with domain expertise then builds that level of transparency that organizations need. And you can't do this manually. As I said, companies are now building out ecosystems. that I call an operational system of record. You know, organizations have all the information about their customers in CRM systems. They have all their financial information in ERP systems. They now need an operational system of record to know how their companies and firms and organizations are servicing their customers. So we're seeing strategic portfolio management, which is the combination of strat planning, enterprise architecture, and portfolio management, forming the planning tier. And then you have the execution tiers of PPM tools, perhaps PSA tools if you are a project-based organization, and collaborative work management to help organizations work with development and IT organizations to deliver digital value on a continuous basis. And linking them to data tiers via APIs or integration hubs enables you to bring the data together so that you're moving from pools and stores of data to connected insights to help you make decisions. So going Agile in a big way requires organizations to bring together people, process, and technology to form an Agile, organic Agile organization. So I'd like to turn it back over to Uli, and thank you for your time.
Thanks very much, Margo. Very insightful presentation. I think there's a number of very interesting topics to take away, starting from aspects such as culture and leadership, or moving from a budget-consuming mode of planning into a value and outcome focused mode of planning and management. And I think a few of those I will be kind of revisiting as we move into this second half of our conversation today. Okay, agility first and foremost, and I think here we are already latching on to Margo's statements. Agility is first and foremost an imperative for digital business success. It requires a strategic approach that can frame an overall direction, strategy, and plan for the organization. And the backlog that, of course, is core to any agile delivery and operations, that backlog isn't just an activity that is coming from the groundswell of developers working in implementation and Scrum teams, but it is really something that equally comes through strategic and operative performance considerations. So when we look at Agile, and when we understand how Agile has kind of panned out over the course of the last decade or so, we of course see that there's a great focus on entrepreneurialism. We see that implementations are more and more able to adjust course to the challenges that they are facing in flight. The implementations have come much closer to the customers and the outcomes that customers are looking to attain. We have been able to reduce red tape quite considerably from the old days of waterfall management, and thereby have increased the speed to market. At the same time, we also see that there are some undesirable consequences. First and foremost, there is too little insight, too little cooperation on the conformance to internal regulations, many of which are very reasonable and many of which are very forward looking into enabling change in the future. There is also insufficient cohesion to strategic objectives and intents. the overall goals and objectives of the organization are being glossed over, and this is leading oftentimes to an unnecessary sprawl of infrastructure, utilization levels that are below expectations and averages, and inevitably then result in unnecessary new investments. So what we're really looking to understand with taking Agile into the big arena is where is that balance between those two sides. It wouldn't probably be the old-fashioned way of governance. What we think is probably up there on the horizon is some concept like lean governance. So what would be the constituents of such a lean governance and strategic portfolio management driven approach for the Agile organization? We have identified four. Firstly, it is strategic portfolio management capabilities that will allow the organization and its leadership to follow business strategy. Secondly, we see a need for a very strong integration capability so as to informing portfolio management ecosystems and facilitating the agile decision making. Thirdly, we have, and that is something that Margo already highlighted in her part, we have a need for synchronizing across a diversity of teams that are anchored in different parts of the organization in their agile development and delivery activities, and that is what is typically being addressed through the road mapping. And then fourthly, we obviously are not here to reinvent the wheel and the world every time anew. We want to build on best practice that is available out there, that has accumulated by organizations that have taken a stab at this early on. So I'm now going through these four pillars of strategic portfolio management, and I'm going to spend a minute or two elaborating on this a little further. So when we look at strategic portfolio management, we understand there is a set of core capabilities that are required here. I have highlighted the agile portfolio and feature management in the center because that is obviously where we are coming from. And if I now look at how do I move from strategy to execution, the one thing that comes to mind first is, okay, where's my line of sight? How do I know what am I supposed to be doing and what am I supposed to be looking at? This is what we call business strategic planning, with the business model definition at the heart. Many of, and that's why we are framing this whole conversation with the digital business agenda, many of today's business models are being transformed and disrupted. They are embracing digital products and services either as a way of re-innovating the business, or being forced by new entrants into the respective market that companies are operating in. Resulting from this, we know that we need to validate and operationalize on our strategy. So when we have identified the digital products and services that we are aiming for, we need to translate this into business visions and goals. And we need to make sure that we are setting the right direction for the many different cycles of planning activities that Margo had alluded to. And then third in this list, we have the business capabilities. So understanding how the change in business model, how the strategies, visions, and goals translate into change need for the capabilities that are the makeup of the company, of the organization. And how will changes in these business capabilities help me move the needle towards achieving corporate strategy? In a second sway of thought, we would go into the domain of business IT relationship management. I think Margo had used the term grooming the backlogs opposed to defining business design requirements, documents of hundreds of pages. When we talk about grooming the backlogs, we are talking about a more open, a more inviting demand management process. We are looking into embracing ideation and innovation management. And we need to make sure that those demands, whatever direction they come from, are exposed, juxtaposed vis-a-vis the business priorities such as customer experience. We need to understand how those digital products and services can reach the target market, and that is by and large a question around the operating model. Are the operating models that we have in place today, are they still adequate to delivering the business model aspirations that we have for tomorrow? And oftentimes the answer will be no. And then we have immediately the question, okay, what needs to be done in order for us to close the gap? And that would clearly lead back into the demand management arena that I had tapped on just a moment ago. And then lastly, as we are in the age of digital business and digital opportunities, we always want to know, okay, and how do we synchronize business and IT here? Yep. Remember the statements that Margo had on the leadership, articulating how they are not sure as to whether or not they understand each other the right way, as to whether the business understands the technology opportunities that are out there, or the IT understands the business priorities. So business IT synchronization is core in this context. And then third in line here is, of course, we are all organizations that have come into existence not just yesterday. We have years and decades of valuable history and experience that we are carrying around with us, and the Agile strategy to execution, strategic portfolio management approach need to embrace this experience. This means we need to understand how can we build on the portfolios that we already have? How can we optimize or how can we establish a process of incorporating insights from the Agile development into that continuous portfolio optimization process? How do we coordinate the change needs that are coming from the left side of the picture here with the ones that are coming from the right-hand side? So the ones that are looking for operational improvements, that are looking for evergreening initiatives, that are looking into aspects like cloud enablement and cloud migration or replatforming and the like. And lastly, this is calling for an integration of planning and delivery activities. And of course, we cannot do this in a vacuum. We are all subject to the eagle eyes of our peers in the financial organization. So we need to transition to an agile funding approach, much like Margo had outlined. But that transition need to accommodate for the cultural stress that this is inevitably bringing into those organizations that are around for 20, 50, or maybe even hundreds of years. And we need to establish budgeting and funding approaches that can link to the business capabilities, to the strategic themes, to the value streams. So moving away from the organizationally dominated budget wars that Margo had highlighted in her part. So when we now come to the next of our 4 pillars on the integration side, there is loads and loads of information available in most of organizations that would inform the strategic portfolio management ecosystem that would allow for improving the quality of decision making, that would allow for incorporating all the different aspects that are required for taking good strategic portfolio management decisions that can provide that air cover for the agile enterprise that we are seeking. I'm not reading that slide out for you. You can see this all for yourself. I'm just highlighting one example here, which would be an integration between strategic portfolio management and JIRA as an example for the DevOps focused operational solutions. So bettering the feature backlog management means bringing a layer on top of the often stovepiped, focused execution of Scrum teams in their respective JIRA projects through the strategic portfolio management to understand, okay, where are my products, where are my applications, where are my APIs, where are my microservices that are the enabler for attainment of strategic outcomes and business value. And how do I connect and link this to the parts of the organization and the parts of the change that we could have deliberately taken a decision to continue running in a waterfall world because their need for change isn't as dramatic. The processes that we have established there are very well functioning and bringing change into this area would just cause unnecessary disruption. So that's on the integration end. Now, moving on to the road mapping. So we are looking into how can we sync the organization around the delivery activities and plans. We're going to start with an understanding that we have three very different archetypes of portfolios, and understanding these portfolios will allow us to understand or to know the what's, where's, when, and who's of change. At the center, of course, is the IT change portfolio. This is where the digital transformation is happening or is being executed, but equally, we have the business strategy portfolio that tells us the route that we need to take. And we have the IT asset portfolios that tell us the starting point and that allow us to understand, okay, how can we leverage what we have in order for us to speed up the journey to take us to those deliveries of desired outcomes and values. And synchronizing all this requires roadmaps, and these roadmaps are all over the place, and these roadmaps are being owned by a variety of different people across a very federated mashup of organizational responsibilities, leading from strategic responsibilities into portfolio responsibilities, product responsibilities, all the way to the responsibilities of individual developers to developing or delivering on a specific feature request or user story. So moving to the fourth of the pillars, talking about the Agile at Scale frameworks. And of course, there are many of those Agile at Scale frameworks out there. You will pick and choose them based on the cultural circumstances of your organization. Again, tapping back to an aspect that Margo had covered in her part. And whether it is SAFe or it is Lean Portfolio or it is Nessus or any of these, the important element here is that you strike the right balance of establishing business process that can guide decision making, that can evolve from the strategy to commitments and deliveries, and that you have that continuous line of sight and transparency all across the different steps in the decision-making process, and you have the right orchestration and cadence in coordinating these processes that inevitably have different cycle times. So taking a look at some examples here from the product. One I want to highlight is the demand funnel analysis that is core to the strategic portfolio management topic. We are looking at a strategic theme to exchange extra production capacity that would be kind of, we are in an utilities environment here, that would be bringing a utility provider into a position to actually become a broker of energy between different parties that typically are being looked at as customers. When we look at some of the highlights here on the screen, we see immediately the importance of metrics, of the adoption for enterprise agile methodologies. So the ratio between demands and epics would be one that a company may choose to pick up on. The metric of budget allocation, how much of budget do I keep available to continuously make decisions, and how much of budget is being locked down early on in the budget cycle because it is a result of one of these budget wars that Margo was alluding to. How do we execute on the investments? Are we running agile release trains, or are we locked down into waterfall projects? We are looking into a continuous flow, the grooming of the backlog, continuous flow of demand and epics, and a decision process that could, for instance, be led by a Kanban board approach, such as demonstrated here. So Kanban isn't necessarily just something that happens in the operational DevOps world, but that has its applicability much the same way on the strategic themes and on the funnel management. And last on this slide, the finance metrics. So how do I see whether pursuing a specific demand, pursuing an element from the funnel would be beneficial to the organization? Cost revenue estimates is a principle that has proven to be valuable in this context. Expanding this example into the topic of investment portfolio management. So I'm staying on the same strategic theme, but now I'm moving to the investment portfolio view. This multi-perspective is also something that is very characteristic to strategic portfolio management. Oftentimes you need these many different perspectives, such as you can see here on the little tabs like ecosystem, the value streams, etc. Again, we have a set of metrics at the heart of it. In this case, these are risk metrics. So how high is my risk of missing delivering the value? This is the most important thing in the Agile Enterprise conversation. Am I able to deliver outcomes and values? We have other metrics more around financial and quality risk. And then we look at a number of investment metrics. No time to highlight all of them here, but we are, for instance, looking into investment margins. So that is something that will help you convince the financial part of the organization to support you in moving to this Agile Enterprise and to this new budget management and financial accounting approach and practice. And of course, you want to have a risk portfolio approach so that you can implement this fail often, fail fast type of approach that is also seen as a core element in the Agile Enterprise approach and any successful implementation thereof. So here we are back with the 4 pillars. Strategic portfolio management capabilities are required to really building that network of interaction that Margo had highlighted. Integration with the portfolio management ecosystem goes back to Margo's last slide, where we had seen strategic portfolio management as one of the layers in a multi-layer interactions scheme of management solutions. All of them are necessary. All of them have their goods. All of them contribute to the overall delivery of digital transformation. We had looked into how roadmaps enable coming to a common understanding of what are we headed to, and we had looked into the Agile at Scale frameworks as a way of jump-starting the journey that many of us are simply beginners with. So now let me come back to that question of, so is strategic portfolio management a barrier, a hindrance? Is it at odds with the Agile development as we have seen it? And we believe not at all. So we see that strategic portfolio management will give us great opportunity into improving collaboration and decision making. It will help us connect the different Agile teams and coordinate their actions along assets and investments. It will help us establishing a common vocabulary to driving this journey, and a central repository of systems, glossaries, nomenclature, APIs, microservices, yet, will help everybody sing from the same song sheet. Secondly, we see strategic portfolio management as an enabler for speed to market. The Agile teams, of course, they will focus on the operational delivery, on the DevOps practices, but strategic portfolio management can add this further detail to it, how all this is related to strategy, how all this is related to the existing portfolios, how all this can leverage and benefit of other activities that are being carried out throughout the organization. And then thirdly, we see that strategic portfolio management will help us being prepared for tomorrow and improving the compliance situation. Agile teams need to have that predictable enterprise frame that would allow them to excel, to deliver, to be excellent in quality and in the speed. So that means we are supporting propagation of internal regulations, and we are providing that single source of truth for every asset that is relevant in the digital business transformation journey. And I think with this, we have reached the end of our program. We have a few minutes left for questions, so maybe Paula.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have a few that have come in, some through the Q&A, some through the chat to me. So one viewer is asking, and I'll address this to Margo, is there resistance from parts of an organization, for example, the waterfall supporters, when one is attempting to implement Agile projects?
Generally, yes. Even though we want to say that it isn't, generally there's resistance. That's just human nature. Some of the ways that we've seen organizations counter this, in the way that when I work with organizations, how you can help to counter this is to show how you can apply Agile techniques to help improve communication practices, for example, within a waterfall process, so that you can begin to educate the waterfall folks on what can be helpful to them. And also, at the end of the day, you also have to understand that not every work stream that you embark upon is going to be suitable for Scrum or XP or some other form of what's thought of as an Agile practice, but you can always apply Agile techniques or leverage something like Kanban in a traditional workflow in order to better manage capacity, handoffs, and communication.
Good. All right. Fine. Thank you. Good answer. I'll address this next one to Uli, who are the customers of Alphabet. Why don't you talk about maybe just like the demographics of our customers?
Sure. So yeah, so customers of Alphabet are organizations that understand the challenge of the digital business transformation, and those are organizations both in the public as well as in the commercial space. If I look at the public space first, then we clearly are talking about federal government agencies, we are talking about state agencies, but we're also talking about cities. Because all of them need to live up to the digital expectations that citizens have today when they interact with government agencies. On the commercial side, we see some industries that are probably more attracted by the prospect of Agile enterprise. We are talking about financial services, for instance. We are talking about big manufacturing. We are talking about organizations that have a high benefit from leveraging state-of-the-art technology for their business models. They obviously have different maturity in the way they are dealing with things, and our go-to-market and the way we provide the product caters to this through various editions of the product as well as accelerator solutions that we offer.
Okay, good, thanks. Let's see, I've got another one from Margo. How many companies have a chief strategist? You talked about the chief strategist. And what is the chief strategist's relationship to the IT organization?
The term chief strategist is one that we've seen in a small percentage of organizations. It isn't necessarily it has to be called that name. Very often we'll see a strategic planning office or a value delivery office where it is a group of like I said, virtual and physical resources that are responsible for owning the end-to-end strategic planning and portfolio analysis process. I think that's the thing that's most important, is that you get somebody to own the end-to-end process versus having a title to do that. It's really more important to have the role.
Okay, right, understood. That's good. All right, one last question. I'll address this one to Uli because you spoke about the enterprise architecture. What is the role of the enterprise architecture team in strategic portfolio management for Agile organizations?
I think enterprise architecture team is very much an enabler for the strategic portfolio management. More than anybody else in these complex organizations, enterprise architects are the ones that actually understand those subtle dependencies across the many different portfolios and dimensions that have to come together for sound, future-proof decision-making. So we're talking about, of course, strategies and capabilities and business models, and yes, many enterprise architects will feel home in this area. We are talking about the operating model. We are talking about all the portfolios in the estate, be it applications, microservices, APIs, information assets, etc., etc. So the enterprise architect community will be a part of that strategic portfolio management mesh though they are not necessarily the portfolio managers. Portfolio managers will typically gravitate towards more of a business function, and they are looking for enterprise architects' help and assistance in having the right understanding of dependencies and connectivity.
Okay, thanks. Actually, I'm going to ask one more question because this interests me also. So Margo, this is for you. Does the budgeting for the products that IT delivers reside within business or IT, from what you've been seeing? Or what do you think it should be?
Well, it is, I'll give the analyst answer. It depends. If it's something that's customer facing and is conceived, managed, and run by the business, we're starting to see those product budgets being owned by the business. And if it's something that is going to be a corporate set of systems that are, infrastructure, whether it's cloud infrastructure or on-premise infrastructure, those things are managed by the IT budget. So it really is an it depends answer.
Okay. All right. Good. All right. Thanks very much then. You've both done your duty very well today. Thanks very much, Margo. Thanks, Uli. Thanks everyone for joining us. I'm just going to, we have one more question. Okay, I will ask this question. Let's just do this one more time. Again, this will be for Margo. This is a good question. What do you think about co-development and co-funding with business in order to avoid shadow IT within this agile way of working? It's a good question.
Great question. Great question. And I think that it is, that's always going to be a challenge, and co-funding can help reduce that challenge or that risk, but I don't know that you'll ever get rid of it, because the minute you mandate, somebody goes and downloads an application. But I think if you look at the slide that we had where it was a product where there was an overlap between product and IT, when you think about a transactional system, there are going to be elements that should be owned by the business, and there's going to be the transaction back office processing that most likely will be owned by IT. And so how do you combat that? It's collaborative planning and understanding where should we be, where should the funding come from, and how should we determine funding buckets going forward. And it also sometimes will force an organization to look at how they set up their chart of accounts to make it simpler versus all of the cost accounting nightmares that we all deal with today.
Yeah, good. All right. Very good. Okay, so once again, thanks a lot. And so with this, no more questions as far as I can see. So I'll hand it off to Will to close out the session.
Thank you to everybody. Just a reminder that this program will be posted to our channel on YouTube later this afternoon. So with that, Uli and Margo, thank you so much for an incredible presentation today. Our program has now ended. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Margo. Thank you, Will.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.